Thank you for tuning in to Part 2 of Exodus 21, NCCI Universum's biblical read-along on the laws of human relations. We will be using the Hebraic name Yah instead of Lord and Elohim instead of God. We hope that you are edified as you read along with us about the ancient laws of Elohim regarding human relations. Please don't forget to subscribe and give this video a like, as it will help the channel grow. The times we are living in are perilous and unpredictable. We live in a world where materialism, temporary gratification, debauchery, murder, theft, and division have become societal norms. Humanity attempts to strategize solutions to these problems through political channels, trying to determine what they believe to be morally advantageous. However, in doing so, they often neglect to consult or align themselves with the one who defines the ultimate standard by which we should live. By adhering to these divine standards, there would be no threats of violence, murder, or theft. There would be no blinding love for material excess or unnatural affections. Instead, there would be peace all over the world. Rather than imaging God as his children, mankind is relishing in the fallen state inherited through the fall of Adam. By default, humanity has become children of the world. As the Apostle Paul said to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 3 verse 3, "For you are still controlled by your sinful nature. You are jealous of one another and quarrel with each other. Doesn't that prove you are controlled by your sinful nature? Aren't you living like people of the world?" Sin, as defined in 1 John 3 verse 4, is the transgression of God's laws, which humanity has been conditioned to believe it no longer has to keep. What we encounter daily through news and social media illustrates the concept of what sin and worldliness is. Let's continue on this journey through the laws of human relations to see what our world would look like if mankind kept the standards that God prescribed in the days of old.
Verse 21. But if the slave recovers within a day or two, then the owner shall not be punished, since the slave is his property. Verse 22. Now suppose two men are fighting, and in the process they accidentally strike a pregnant woman, so she gives birth prematurely. If no further injury results, the man who struck the woman must pay the amount of compensation the woman's husband demands, and the judges approve. Verse 23. But if there is further injury, the punishment must match the injury. A life for a life. Verse 24. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, a foot for a foot. Verse 25. A burn for a burn, a wound for a wound, a bruise for a bruise. Verse 26. If a man hits his male or female slave in the eye and the eye is blinded, he must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. Verse 27. And if a man knocks out the tooth of his male or female slave, he must let the slave go free to compensate for the tooth. Verse 28. If an ox gores a man or woman to death, the ox must be stoned, and its flesh may not be eaten. In such a case, however, the owner will not be held liable. Verse 29. But suppose the ox had a reputation for goring, and the owner had been informed but failed to keep it under control. If the ox then kills someone, it must be stoned, and the owner must also be put to death. Verse 30. However, the dead person's relatives may accept payment to compensate for the loss of life. The owner of the ox may redeem his life by paying whatever is demanded. Verse 31. The same regulation applies if the ox gores a boy or a girl. Verse 32. But if the ox gores a slave, either male or female, the animal's owner must pay the slave's owner 30 silver coins, and the ox must be stoned. Verse 33. Suppose someone digs or uncovers a pit and fails to cover it, and then an ox or a donkey falls into it. Verse 34. The owner of the pit must pay full compensation to the owner of the animal, but then he gets to keep the dead animal. Verse 35. If someone's ox injures a neighbor's ox and the injured ox dies, then the two owners must sell the live ox and divide the price equally between them. They must also divide the dead animal. Verse 36. But if the ox had a reputation for goring, yet its owner failed to keep it under control, he must pay full compensation, a live ox for the dead one, but he may keep the dead ox. Exodus 22 verse 1. If someone steals an ox or sheep and then kills or sells it, the thief must pay back 5 oxen for each ox stolen, and 4 sheep for each sheep stolen. Verse 2. If a thief is caught in the act of breaking into a house and is struck and killed in the process, the person who killed the thief is not guilty of murder. Verse 3, but if it happens in daylight, the one who killed the thief is guilty of murder. Here is an example for verse 3. If you saw him walking along the road with some of your belongings, you cannot walk up to him and put him to death because he does not pose an imminent threat to you or your family. A thief who is caught must pay in full for everything he stole. If he cannot pay, he must be sold as a slave to pay for his theft. Verse 4. If someone steals an ox or a donkey or a sheep and it is found in the thief's possession, then the thief must pay double the value of the stolen animal. Verse 5. If an animal is grazing in a field or vineyard, and the owner lets it stray into someone else's field to graze, then the animal's owner must pay compensation from the best of his own grain or grapes. Verse 6. If you are burning thorn bushes and the fire gets out of control and spreads into another person's field, destroying the sheaves or the uncut grain or the whole crop, the one who started the fire must pay for the lost crop. Verse 7. Suppose someone leaves money or goods with a neighbor for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the neighbor's house. If the thief is caught, the compensation is double the value of what was stolen.